It's very frightening living somewhere where it's illegal to just be yourself. I don't want to live in fear.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 everyday things that are banned in Russia.
In fact, that impact on quality of life is already being felt.
For this list, we'll be looking at normal, mundane activities, goods, and services that exist in America and the West, but are reportedly banned in Vladimir Putin's Russia, or at least in some areas of it. Do you know of any other everyday acts that could earn someone a one-way trip to the gulag? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10. Yoga. Although yoga has become a popular source of stretching and exercise in the West, it originated as a spiritual practice in the East.
In 196 manuals called the Yoga Sutras. These texts defined yoga as the yoking or restraining of the mind from focusing on external objects, in efforts to reach a state of pure consciousness.
Yoga began as a Hindu and later Buddhist meditative practice in ancient India. It's those origins that bothered Russian officials in the city of Nizhnevartovsk in 2015. They sent letters to yoga studios throughout the city to cease and desist, citing the practices as a way of spreading new religious cults. The ban was ironic. Russia co-sponsored International Yoga Day at the UN, and its Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev is known to practice yoga himself.
The international festival brings together 75 schools from all over Russia teaching this ancient Indian practice.
Number 9. Lace underwear. People in Russia and its neighbors Kazakhstan and Belarus have spent almost a decade lingerie-free. In July of 2014, all three countries enacted a set of safety regulations for underwear.
Local news in Kazakhstan reporting on a woman being detained for demanding the right to wear lace knickers. Why are you afraid of panties? She shouts.
All clothing touching the skin, meaning underwear, must be at least 6% cotton for one's health. Since most lacy lingerie tends to consist of less than 4% cotton, it's effectively banned in Russia.
It will outlaw any underwear containing less than 6% of cotton from being imported, made or sold in the three countries.
While the countries claimed that the ban was not motivated by morality, some people didn't buy it. The Russian parliament at the time was 85% male and utterly conservative.
But for many, it's yet another example of the misguided economic policies that have become a trademark of many post-Soviet countries.
One party also attempted to follow up with another ban on high heels. Number 8. Sex education. For decades, religious right-wing forces around the world have fought sex education for minors. In 2010, those forces won the battle in Russia. The Russian Duma passed a law ostensibly meant to protect children from information harmful to their health and development.
In many situations, the arguments from science are not so effective as arguments from the church. But we think that it's better first to save life and then to save soul.
In reality, the law effectively ended sex education in the entire country. The results? Between 2017 and 2021, the number of Russians reporting a positive HIV status almost doubled from 800,000 to 1.5 million.
We didn't say that we have no problems with HIV. We announced that, in fact, we have problem, but we're trying to solve it.
There is widespread ignorance as to how the disease is transmitted, with a stigma reminiscent of the 1980s in the United States.
Critics say these attitudes are partly why Russia is one of the few places on Earth where HIV spread continues to increase at a rate of 10% every year.
Number 7. Certain memes. While speech has never exactly been free in Russia, the internet has led the government to enact a series of crackdowns.
All right, so Russia is not known as a press-friendly government, and judging by the way the Kremlin has responded since this war began, that reputation is not likely to improve.
Social media led to an explosion of memes that allegedly infuriated President Putin, especially those critical of the government.
What happens next?
North Korea. I think this is our future.
In 2015, the country's censorship agency, Roskomnadzor, made millions of memes illegal overnight. Any meme that portrays a public figure in a derogatory or satirical light was banned. Similarly, Russia also keeps a tight leash on popular and independent blogs.
This list is a new weapon for this regime to censor voices that it doesn't like. The list is huge, and it is growing every day.
If a blog gets more than 3,000 views per day, you'll fall under government censorship regulations and must register with the state. Number 6. Driving while trans. In 2014, Russia was dealing with a traffic fatality crisis. Russian roads were one of the deadliest places on Earth. The Duma passed a law meant to combat traffic fatalities by regulating the distribution of driver's licenses.
Moscow has not elaborated on how exactly the law will be enforced, but says it's necessary to try and stem the large number of road accidents in Russia.
They listed a number of physical and mental conditions that would prevent a Russian individual from driving. One group added to the Russian no-drive list were trans people.
Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev signed off an order last week indicating people could be banned from getting driver's licenses based on their sexual identity and orientation.
In July 2023, the Russian Duma decided to follow their anti-LGBTQIA+ laws to their natural conclusion. They began the process to ban gender affirmation altogether.
The law also prevents people from changing their gender on official documents and bars transgender couples from fostering or adopting children.
Number 5. Swearing. George Orwell once wrote, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." By Orwell's definition, liberty is sorely lacking in Putin's Russia. In an attempt to stifle free speech, the Russian government targeted language in television, theater, and film in 2014.
Under the new legislation, profanity in films and theater is now a crime punishable by heavy fines.
Swearing is now illegal and subject to fines both for individuals and organizations. Books that contain swears must have a warning label.
If I need to, I'm prepared to take this fight to the courts. I just don't want to have any contact with the government, which wages war on artists.
The law is a throwback to the Soviet-era laws meant to prevent Russians from following the linguistic example of the decadent West.
Previously, the foul language was prohibited everywhere else but art, and this little indulgence turns into a big problem. There was so much filth from the screen or theater stage. People and organizations were asking to stop this ugliness.
Number 4. LinkedIn. Authoritarian countries like Russia and China have adapted to the internet age by tightening their iron grips on the public.
So a disinformation campaign being engaged here by the Kremlin, the silencing of the free press, the silencing of any critic against Putin.
They've enacted strict rules about how websites and social media companies operate in their countries. In 2016, Roskomnadzor announced that the professional networking site LinkedIn would no longer be allowed to operate in Russia at all. Their rationale is all about personal information. LinkedIn stores user data on servers that are not housed in Russia. For Roskomnadzor, this is a big no-no. They want user data to be stored within Russia, presumably for easy government access.
All this is so draconian. This approach is not sustainable long-term.
Number 3. Gay propaganda. Russian leaders have denounced the decadence of Western values since the early days of the Soviet Union. In the modern context, Putin and the Kremlin have used the LGBTQIA+ community as a scapegoat and foil for what they consider to be their moral superiority.
Россия остается одним из последних, если не последним, форпостом защиты традиционных ценностей. Именно поэтому нам необходимо поставить конец и положить заслон всей этой, извините, коллеги, без преувеличения мерзости.
Though the Russian government has been openly hostile to LGBTQIA+ people for years, they have recently stepped up their laws. The Russian parliament passed an anti-gay propaganda law in 2013.
How Russia decides to prosecute this law remains to be seen, through a barrage of cases or just by scaring people into self-censorship.
And strengthened it in 2022. Portraying non-cisgendered heterosexual lifestyles in anything other than a negative light is now illegal, making gay pride a crime. Pride events have been violently broken up by Russian police, leaving LGBTQIA+ Russians with fewer rights than their neighbors.
While same-sex relationships as such were decriminalized in Russia back in 1993, critics say that the so-called gay propaganda law is stoking homophobia in the country.
Number 2. Drugs, including common prescriptions. Despite being in a country notorious for doping in sports, Russia has zero tolerance for their drugs. Their anti-drug laws are some of the strictest in the world. People with substance use disorders face long prison sentences as well as mandatory treatment. The recent harsh sentence doled out to American WNBA star Brittany Griner illustrated to the West how harsh Russia's laws can be.
Standing in a cage in a Russian courtroom, hearing she's been sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison camp.
But in addition to cracking down on illegal narcotics like cocaine and heroin, some common Western prescription drugs are also prohibited in Russia. In the West, conditions like ADHD are often treated with medication like Adderall. Unfortunately, Adderall contains amphetamines, which are not allowed at all in Russia.
Operations like this are increasingly common since the creation of the State Drug Control Agency. Every year there's an increase in the amount of drugs we confiscate.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Western food, like European cheese. 8 years before their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia took Crimea. America and its European allies responded with a host of sanctions, many of which have never been lifted. Russia retaliated with sanctions of their own, denying a market to a number of Western goods and services. Western expats and Russian citizens have spent the better part of the decade without access to American or European foodstuffs.
Russians are not getting everything that they need. We're regularly hearing reports filtering out of Russia of people unable to access medicines or frustrated with the high price of goods on the shelves.
For example, steaks from the U.S. and Australia are not allowed in Russia. Neither are cheeses or wines from France. As a result, food prices, especially after the 2022 round of sanctions on Russia, exploded.
Russia, they're calling it the sugar panic. As Western sanctions on the country bite, ordinary people have been snapping up essentials.